Hello, 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 and welcome to The Long Road Podcast. The journey goes ever on with The Long Road, brought to you by Artisan Creative. This episode, sitting, holding some dead tree, and hallucinating. Join us, three wandering vagabonds, for an insightful discussion into Dean Koontz's latest book, The House at the End of the World. This week, Steve explores the Vagabond Heart by delving into risk. Kev shares the aftermath of his Camino trek, and the Bishop discusses twists, twirls, and turnovers. Presumably pastry-related rather than gymnastics, but you'll have to listen right to the end to find out. The Long Road Podcast, where authenticity meets adventure. Join Steve Bonham, Kev Moore, and me, Chris the Bishop Lydon, from the renegade Americana band The Long Road, as we defy stereotypes with our very own brand of quirkiness and rebellion, shaking off the stereotypes of sex, drugs, and suffering. Get ready for ridiculous tales, offbeat musings, and downright daft moments. Tune in for laughs, tunes, and a rebellious spirit. Hop on the wild ride with the Long Road Podcast from Artisan Creative. Greetings, I am Chris the Bishop Lydon. Great to have you back with us for another slice of life in the brains and the lives of the Long Road. If you happen to be in North Carolina in the US this week, our Steve is off on a solo tour over there with friend of the podcast, Rob McHale. So do check out our website for lists of gigs if you want to go and see Steve in person, thelongroadband.net, and all the other great musicians that we're playing with him. Rob always does a brilliant job curating the artists for the showcases they put on over there. Storytellers and original songs are priorities, and in fact, for some of the shows, I believe, a requirement. Part of the rules are that you have to be original. Best wishes to Kev as he completes actually his second segment of the Camino Trail. Today's show, you'll hear about the aftermath of his first long segment back in 2020, but in the coming weeks, you'll hear fresh tales from the trail. The pictures on Facebook I've seen have been brilliant. The places, the people, the stories. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Steve and I have a bunch of shows and performances coming up this year around the UK, so do check out artisan-creative.com for information. There you can also pre-order our Hard Country limited edition, special edition 12-inch vinyl, our latest album featuring the brand new track Ain't Gonna Fake It, and revamped versions of our heavier, rockier stuff. Head to artisan-creative.com/shop. Don't forget, if you like what we do, consider buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thelongroadband. Support all things Artisan Creative at our Patreon, patreon.com/artisancreative. Now, before we get into the talky bit of the podcast, it's time for Track of the Week, which is again my choice, a song from the Long Road's back catalogue. This week, a song that is a band favourite, a crowd favourite, and actually had DJs around the world dropping us messages complimenting us on this track. This week is the cinematic juggernaut that is Western Requiem. Western Requiem remembers the legend of the Old West as portrayed in old movies, a place of instantly recognisable heroes and villains, rough-hewn characters and landscapes, of rare certainties and the inevitability that good will win out. It's elegiac and haunting, featuring the piano, that's me, and some fine guitar from Kev, exploring the archetypal, the bandit queen, the man in black, Geronimo ghost dancers, with a chorus that is an almost hymn to freedom. The song fades into a never-ending sunset of memory and affirmation. Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you dance with me all night long at the desert's edge beneath the Joshua tree? Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you sing a song for me about the time that freedom called, you'd walk along with me?
When the last buffalo has gone, medicine man has come undone, the balm summer touches down, and the trail is westward bound. Geronimo has quit the show. John Wayne never made the Alamo. Ghost dancers dance in vain. Fires go out in summer rain. Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you dance with me all night long at desert's edge, beneath the Joshua tree. Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you sing a song for me about the time the freedom call, you'd walk along with me. About the time the freedom called, you'd walk along with me. The man in black kneels down to pray. Bandit queen has run away, shooting up the old saloon. Mad dogs barking at the moon. Don't bleach out the Kodachrome, where the ghosts of the Mustang roam. Farewell to the last of them. This is my western requiem. Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you dance with me all night long at the desert's edge, beneath the Joshua tree? Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you sing a song for me about the time the freedom called, you'd walk along with me? About the time the freedom called, you'd walk along with me.
And now onto our three-way chat discussing Dean Koontz's House at the End of the World. Greetings, here we are, the three of us together again for another digital chat over Zoom, talking about our fun little things that go on in our brains that we think we might share with people and see if they find it funny too. So, hello to Kev in Spain. Kev, hello.
Arne!
Oh, wow.
Or depending on
Arne.
the time of day, Maha.
Ah, interesting. Where in the world could that be from? I mean, the second one felt sort of Hawaiian, sort of Pacific kind of thing. Am I anywhere near?
No.
No,
I mean, the
it's
first.
fine, Kev. I can take it. Just say no.
The first one was hello. If I was to say good, if I was to say good morning in that language, it would be mache.
Right.
And good afternoon is maha.
No, don't know. Where's that from?
It's Ghana. It's Ghanaian.
Oh, right. I know a little song in Ghanaian.
Do you?
Just trying to remember which one it was now. It's a little round. We used to sing it with back when I used to work for a music service.
Oh, wow.
How did it go? There was one that si do la da yaku sinna la do banaha. That was one.
You've just blown my mind, Bish, that you could just randomly go, I know a bit of Ghanaian.
There was one from Ghana and there was one from, I think, Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. Oh, right. So si da la da was one, and the other one was two-way, barima, two-way, barima, two-way, ambassador, amadore, two-way, barima, two-way. But I can't remember which was which. So one of those, I think, is a Ghanaian folk song, and the other one is from the Congo.
I only know things like Tushika Jife, Monana, Tushika Mafe, Monana Lilafe.
Right.
Everything I do, my donkey. Everything I do, my donkey does it too. Useful to break the ice, you know.
You never know when you're at the border whether that comes up. And we've got Steve at home in Derbyshire. Steve, hello.
Bona!
Oh, say it again for me. Say it again.
Bona!
So that sounds like a good, like bona day, good day.
It's Romanian. It's Romanian.
It's Romanian? What?
Oh.
Hang on, you've already done Romanian. The Romanian one was different. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
Right, we'll have to remember that for next time we're on this chat, Kev. Steve's trying to hustle us.
I'm going for the triple next time.
They're all Romanian. Remember that. Romanian. I'll put a big banner on my thing. Right, here we are. So today we've got a new feature on the podcast which we haven't done before. Similar to our recipe of the month, which we've done, and the band of the month. We're going to do a book of the month.
Indeed,
and we're going to all three of us read a book and then chat about it. A bit like a book club, I suppose. And if you at home fancy reading along as well. We're probably not prepared enough to pre-warn people what the books are necessarily. If you hear us talking about it and you want to join in and tell us what you think, by all means join in after the fact. Why not? Yes. So this choice was Kev's choice this time. So Kev, tell us a little about the book, who it's by, and why you chose it. And
I've probably thrown the lads a bit of a curve with this one because I would imagine it's probably not their particular type of reading. It's by an American author by the name of Dean Koontz. Dean Koontz has been with me for, it feels like a lifetime. I've been reading his books for decades. And the first one I read was how so often you get into authors. It was a tired, well-thumbed, dog-eared paperback called Strangers.
Right.
And I loved the way that particular book drew the stories of like 5 or 10 different people together through the book. You didn't know where it was going, and then it had a really satisfying denouement at the end. And I just loved his style of writing. I like things that are a little bit otherworldly. I just became hooked on his book from then on. He went a bit more mainstream in his later books, but he's now occasionally delving back into that. It's not out and out supernatural stuff or sci-fi stuff, but this particular novel, which I think is more or less his latest, it's on the edge of believability. So it's strange, but it's a what if, it's a what if you could do this.
Yeah.
What if there was the ability to test this and do such a thing? And it's one thing about him, which Steve will like, there's always a canine of some sort in his books. He's a massive dog lover, and he thinks they're the sort of pure souls on the planet, the dogs and what have you. And in this particular book, he does a bit of a twist and introduces a fox into the story, which is a nice sort of twist. And he, as a child, Dean Koontz had a very bad abusive childhood, and he escaped into fiction. And so he likes exploring the human condition, damaged souls, and what have you. And this particular book starts with a recluse, basically, a woman who.
Are we at the title of the book yet?
Yeah,
I was going to say,
the book is called "The House at the End of the World," and it's quite an evocative title, as I'm sure you agree, and. It's kind of got a lot of different meanings as you begin to get into the story and the backstory of the lead character, the woman who has basically taken herself off into seclusion because of an as yet unknown tragedy that has befallen her. And gradually the book reveals the extent of this tragedy and the reasoning behind why she's alone, and how she's trying to manage her grief and her life. And she's in what appears to be an idyllic remote spot, but almost instantly there's something going on another island nearby. And you don't know what it is. There's a threat, but you don't really know what it is. And I do think he's very good at drip feeding the possibilities of what it could be. And then the story involves with a young kid who's on one of the other islands, who's connected to the research facility that we discover is on this island near the original protagonist, and it's basically the story of her through the trials of the book. I won't reveal too much in case people want to read it, but through the trials that she has to go through, it brings her into contact with the young girl, and it gives her a way to starting her life again. And that's the human story through it. The horror of it is I suppose, that the thing that they're dealing with in this research facility is in and of itself quite possibly incredibly ancient and almost certainly malevolent, but the evil that gets done and and what manifests is as usual down to human stupidity and hubris.
Yeah, and that's, all the way through the first part of the book. Obviously, it's well constructed. They know what they're doing in terms of laying seeds, little planting little things that grow and grow and grow throughout. Yeah. And the notion that she's gone to this island and as a way of putting a stop to anything that could affect her, as a way of dealing with it. Yeah. And then outside influences then start to come in again, and
it almost reminds her that she hasn't dealt with it. She's paused life, hasn't she? She's
paused it. Yeah. Tried to pause stuff by put yourself on an island, and that may or may not be a way of dealing with it. Yeah. For a while, it might be, but it seems to be that it's actually not necessarily the way that's going to deal with it. Yeah. I hadn't come across Dean Koontz at all. I don't know the name.
Several of his books have been made into films, almost without exception, badly.
Yes, I did get that sense from having a quick look through the film adaptations list on Wikipedia.
Yeah, I do recommend the Odd Thomas series, which do you remember the kid that played a young Chekhov in the new Star Trek movies?
Yes, Anton Yelchin. Yeah,
he played the character of Odd Thomas in they made a movie of it, which I've yet to see, but the books are wonderful. They're really really unusual, and they were quite a popular series, I believe. But yeah, he's where Stephen King's gone right with the film adaptations Dean Koontz has never been that lucky, really, which is a shame because I put him on equal footing with Stephen King.
It's certainly atmospheric. I mean, it's not a book I'd want to read on my own late at night in a dark room with or without the dog, to be honest. Yeah, it does conjure up that malevolence very quickly. It's quite... I get a really dark atmosphere almost from the first page, and which was really interesting. And I think it, if you like that genre, it's kind of a bit crossing boundaries, isn't it? Is it a horror book? Is it sci-fi? Is it?
I think a lot of people would sort of label it probably as a suspense thriller, but certainly through the first third of it, the first half of it, I start off thinking, okay, it's a sort of straight up thriller, yeah, okay, but then there's a bit of is there a horror element coming in here, and then there's the sort of sci-fi supernatural element coming in as well. It's like I enjoyed that sort of blurring of boundaries there.
Yeah, he's very good at that.
I mean, it's interesting when I got it, Kev. I was sort of smiling because you kicked off with the first book, and I thought, well, and as I say, we are still awaiting your heavy metal horror series, which we're going to publish sometime.
Yes, indeed.
So I thought, well, here we go. This is going to be an insight into Kev's literature and Kev's writing.
Do you know what? That's a good point, Steve. That's a good point because, in fact, when we do publish that collection, you will see that he's a big influence on my sort of horror and sort of strange writing. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I must admit, I got the book, and it came through the post, and I circled it for a few days. It's a bit like, I mean, one of my challenges is straight away, for a guy who's supposed to be bookish, I'm a really lazy reader on the whole. So I have a kind of rule of thumb. The first thing I do is measure the thickness of the book. Not all critics, I know, go to this, but this book is...
For the listener at home, he's actually got to tape measure out. He's got to tape measure out.
It is 3 centimetres.
Right.
It's 3 centimetres thick. And if I compare it to my last book, that's 1 centimetre. So that said, you've really got to be able to dig in here, Steve, to reading it. And the second thing I looked at, and I thought, is the cover, and it's very dramatic, and actually the world has got quite chintzy with the covers, but this book is almost fluorescent in its cover, and I thought, well, that's going to be different, and it was. That sounds like they were criticisms, they're not. It's very just like I had to circle it to think, right, pull your trousers up. You're going to have to get in here and take it on. And, I thank you for it. I'm the guy who goes and looks for the sort of mildly comic novel in the airport if I'm looking for a book to read mostly, or, something that's not going to perturb me. It's a very perturbing book. I liked it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Going back to how you similar to how you came across it, some of the books that I've enjoyed reading, and I'll be honest, I've read some trash, which I've perfectly enjoyed reading.
Yeah.
I'm about to admit to reading some trash, which I've really enjoyed reading. Not because I think it's great literature or great writing, just because it transports me to a different place. I wish I could remember who it was. There was somebody who described reading brilliantly, which completely just blew my mind. You're holding this, mashed up pulp of tree with scrawlings on it, and then you sit and you hallucinate for a bit.
Yes.
I just love the idea of sitting there holding this dead tree and hallucinating, because that's what we do when we read.
That's a beautiful description. Holding a dead tree and hallucinating. That's perfect.
The one that sticks in me from my own experience of reading things was when I was at university, or maybe just after university. I was been on a night out with friends and sleeping on someone's floor afterwards. And my head happened to be next to their bookshelf in their living room. And I saw they had a small array of books on there, and they were all sort of tatty second-hand copied things. And sort of just in my sort of post-drunken state, sort of just picked one up and started reading it. It was called Digital Fortress. And I didn't recognise the name of the author.
Dan Brown.
Well, exactly, Dan Brown. Yeah. Probably one of the best-selling authors of in the world. And I sort of put it off the thing, and then sat up for an hour reading it because it was an absolute page turner.
Yeah.
And I said to my friend in the morning, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I've started reading your book. Can I borrow it?" And she was like, "Yes, absolutely, but take it away," and finish reading it. And then I ended up reading more of Dan Brown. And I don't think his book. I would put Dan Brown in the trash category.
Yeah.
But I have thoroughly enjoyed reading his books.
Yeah, me
I
too.
don't think they're great literature.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll stand necessarily the test of time. But I have a lovely time reading them.
They're entertaining.
Because
entertaining.
They're entertain me. They're a bit like they're a bit like big blockbuster movies.
Yeah.
But they're great, good fun to watch. They will keep me occupied. And they take me somewhere.
Yeah.
And all credit to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
If a book doesn't take me somewhere, I'm not.
Yeah, and I
I'm
think
not necessarily
Dean
gonna
Koontz has got
enjoy
that
it.
ability to draw you in. I think, as you say, you're on that island, aren't you? You know, and it's a pretty weird place.
I mean, Steve, would you say you're more of a fiction man, or would you find yourself reading more of the sort of real life?
Most
stuff?
of the time I read is non-fiction.
Yeah.
And very eclectically. But then I'll have a kind of fiction kind of frenzy for a while where I read 2 or 3 books and I really enjoy it. But it is true, I have to get my head in the right place to get into the fiction, to sort of like do that bit of
The hallucinating
letting myself
bit.
be transported.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I was what they used to call a spontaneous reader, in which case, as far as anyone was concerned, including me, I just started reading. I don't have any memory of being taught to read. And when I was a really weird kid because I read everything. I mean, literally everything. I would read the cereal packet on the breakfast table in the morning. I would read the instructions for my dad's lawnmower. I mean, it was just a compulsion to read. I mean, I read all sorts of books until I was about 14. And then I literally didn't read a book for four years. It was really strange. I just that was it. I probably girls with guitars sort of came into my life. I think probably.
Yes.
I was just going to say that sounds about right time-wise. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I was at 18 and I went to university, I kind of had a sense I was missing something. Like there was a thing that was mine that I hadn't done. And my mum was a big reader. And there was a book. I can remember the title of the book now, and if I read back, I probably think, well, a rubbish book. But it was by Somerset Maugham. It was called Of Human Bondage. I probably thought in my fevered adolescent state it was a sort of sex book or something, but it wasn't.
No.
It wasn't. But I read
Old
it.
Somerset
I
is
read
not
it
known
all.
for it.
Read it all, and absolutely thought, oh, I love doing this. And then I went through a stage where I was just reading, and I went through trying to read all the then hot American novels, and it died out again. So I have periods in my life, and I love the idea of being, I'm writing fiction, which is weird, isn't it? I write fiction and I don't read it. That's pretty strange, isn't it?
I go through periods where I haven't read for months and months and months, or possibly even years, and then I remember, hang on, you enjoyed that sensation of the hallucinating and the transport, and I dig into it again, and I remind myself, well, that was just reading Dean Koontz, The House at the End of the World, and again, if we'd been prepared, we'd tell you what our next book is, but we haven't been, so we'll let you know, we'll let people know, and people can join in at home. If you've got any suggestions for listeners at home, you think, oh, these guys might enjoy this, or these guys might be confronted by that.
Yes.
By all means, drop us a note. We're well up. We don't have to just massage the things that we enjoy. We like being challenged a little bit.
Indeed.
A Vagabond Heart. Risk. I think I've done quite a lot of risky things in my life. I've climbed down rocky cliff faces to save myself a 6-hour walk around. I've let myself be driven through Cairo rush hour by the writer Robert Twigger, an experience which it seems is about 1 million cars, old ladies, donkeys, children, carts, all trying to play a very large game of dodgems with each other. I've slept out in the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by bears. None of these things did I choose to do for their own sake. They were all done in the search for something else. This was just part of getting to what I wanted to be, part of life if I wanted to live it in that particular way. And that seems at the heart of being a vagabond, how you embrace uncertainty. I think in common with Chris and Kev, we could say that none of us have a proper job, or indeed ever really have. A proper job means usually working for someone else with a monthly income and other benefits. I don't think at any time in my life I've been able to see my way more than 3 months into the future, and that included paying my mortgage. So if you want to be a vagabond, necessarily you have to have a different relationship to uncertainty, except that the time horizon to possible disaster is not that far away. There are 3 ways of looking at risk and uncertainty, and I think these days we seem to have forgotten the middle one. There are risk embracers, people who deliberately up the ante for the thrill of it. Hey, let's go jogging through a minefield. Then there are the risk avoiders, people who say, I will not take any risk, I need to be safe at all times, and quite usually expect someone else to do the protecting for them. The middle ground are risk takers. They accept that risk is part of being who you are if you want to get where you want to go. It's something you manage, something that you try and get good at. And I think it was always such, back to our Stone Age ancestors. I don't think they ran around in tribes saying, hey, let's do something really, really dangerous and blindfold ourselves and try and hunt a mammoth. Or let's go and provoke that tiger over there just to see what happens. But in the same moment, they could see, if I don't hunt the mammoth, I won't eat. So let's get on with it. I think we may be losing that kind of sensibility. I'm reading a lovely book at the moment by Chantal Lyon about wild boar in Britain. Yes, I do read odd books, but I thoroughly recommend this one. She talks a little bit about how we become afraid of being afraid. She writes at one point about how people get dismayed at finding themselves sharing spaces with other apparently dangerous animals. Vicious badger roams Scott's school grounds as farmer warns parents, the Daily Record. Man calls 999 because he's scared of a hedgehog, ITV News. And rewilding of Horsham Park, a mad idea amid fears long grass could house a lot of insects, the Sussex Express. Risk takers know that risk can't be avoided. It will always find us out. Let's accept it must and always will be the seasoning for life's journey.
Welcome once more to Kev's Cafe Corner. You join me in Santiago, having completed my Camino, unaware that the troubles of the real COVID-ridden world were about to encroach on my life again, after a period of such blissful, relatively untroubled simplicity. Emile was still kicking her heels here, as her boyfriend had been delayed getting his van fixed and getting here to rendezvous with her. They were scheduled to head down to Portugal for a while and then on to Morocco, travel restrictions notwithstanding. We decided to explore the city at leisure and found some wonderful old buildings and hidden alleyways. One of the strangest things was a brightly coloured statue of 2 women. They're called the 2 Marias of Santiago de Compostela and are located in Alameda Park. They were sisters raised in a family of 13 siblings, and 3 of their brothers were arrested for fighting in the Confederación Nacional de Trabajo against Franco's regime. I think that's the National Workers' Party. The story goes that they were arrested and detained in the 1950s. They were tortured and experienced terrible brutality. And upon release, one died of his injuries and the others went into hiding. Now, the family were constantly persecuted and interrogated as to their whereabouts, leading eventually, sadly, to the deaths of the mother and father and other siblings. The 2 Marias were trained as seamstresses, but because of all the troubles, they could rarely find any work. And in the 60s, to add to their problems, a storm tore the roof off their home. The town collected 250,000 pesetas in donations, which at that time was enough to buy the women a new flat. Now, they would regularly enter Almeida Park at 2 p.m. every day, brightly dressed and in even brighter makeup, gallivanting around and flirting with the younger students. Many locals suggest that the women suffered from poor mental health from a lifetime of the trauma, while others thought they were simply looking for some joy. I prefer to think the latter. They were seen there right up into the 1980s, and eventually they both passed away. They're a symbol of the fight against oppression and equality. That evening, Emile tempted me into my first Japanese restaurant, and I became an instant fan of ramen. After enjoying the city, I got back to my room and started the necessary prep for heading home. I had intended to take a train, but to my horror, due to rapidly tightening restrictions, everyone was getting out of town the next day and there was not a seat to be had. I was panicking a bit. Luckily, I managed to get myself on a plane for the following day, but I was worried about trying to get my Camino staff on board. There was no way I was parting with it, and I felt sure they'd confiscate it. So I went to the post office. Sheepishly, I approached the counter. This might sound crazy, but I couldn't even finish my sentence. You want to post your staff to your home, yes? Yes, I said. Is that possible? We do it all the time, said the postal worker. We have special boxes. We can even post your bike. I don't have a bike, I said, almost apologetically. I enjoyed that welcoming city for another day before walking into the new park to get my bus to the airport. I landed in Alicante around 11 p.m, a head full of memories, and if the truth be known, not quite back in the real world. No buses were running, but there was a line of taxis, and I hopped in one. Benidorm, por favor, I said, as that was where my car was parked. The journey itself was uneventful until we took the turn off the autovia for Benidorm. We were suddenly surrounded by police. The driver was quizzed, and I heard him mutter Inglés to the copper questioning him. They then came round to my side and gestured me to roll down the window. I did so, and they said I couldn't be here, as there was a 10 p.m. curfew. I said, how was I to know that? And why are you allowing taxis to take fares then? And anyway, how am I supposed to get home? He repeated his mantra, you cannot be here. He demanded my passport and took it. He was gone for at least 20 minutes, probably longer. Meanwhile, police continued to surround us, and the cabbie still had the bloody meter running. Said, you can turn that off. He didn't. And when I finally got my passport back and we were waved on our way without further explanation, I'd paid twice as much for a taxi to Benidorm than a flight from Santiago. But that wasn't the end of my troubles. Restrictions were in place, and I still had to cross 2 provinces to make my way home. As I travelled down the autovia, I was detained at the Murcia border and the Almeria border. My saving grace was that I could prove where I lived, and in certain circumstances, as long as you were getting back home and staying there, you were allowed. The problem was, within days, I had to travel north again. Now forewarned, though, I knew where the motorway roadblocks were and turned off the motorway before them, careening through orange groves and dry riverbeds before rejoining the motorway behind enemy lines. I look back on those times with incredulity, in sharp contrast to the peace and serenity I'd enjoyed on the Camino. And now, as I sit talking to you, dear listener, it is nearly 4 years later, and the way is calling me again. In a few days, I'll be flying to Santiago to walk from the city square to Finisterre, World's End. Unfinished business, you might say. Maybe you can join me on it?
twists, twirls, turnovers, perhaps even some tucks or twirls or even a tart. Fear not, those of you questioning my return to the gymnastics floor. Those days are long behind me. I am today talking all inventions with pastry, in particular buff pastry, I suppose. Now, I am partial to a turnover, although now I think on it, quite what has been turned over, I'm not sure. Again, and this might be a theme here with regards to food, and perhaps the case for most people. Nostalgia kicks in, and I distinctly remember an apple turnover as a youngster from M&S, I think it must have been. So 2 slices, forming the case of puff pastry, baked thin and crispy, the top covered in those huge crispy sugar crystals you get, and then the whole thing filled with a rich, sweet and sharp apple jam, compote, whatever you'd call it, and thick whipped cream. Of course, completely impossible to eat in any respectable manner, as the insides begin to squeeze out as soon as you press into it, but it was delicious. I wasn't enough of a bougie heathen back then to even consider eating such a messy dish with a knife and fork, but I'm afraid these days I might just. I'm pretty much a full-on convert to a knife and fork for anything more than the simplest burger, for example, these days. Anything approaching complicated, a few stacks, a few layers, and it's a knife and a fork for me. Neater, more efficient, fewer toppings strewn down my front. Anyway, yes, I wonder what has been turned over it for it to be a turnover. One quick Google later. Yes, I see. You start with a pastry square, put the filling in sort of one half, and then fold the other half over, forming a triangle. More of a fold over than a turnover, but there you go. Apparently the original is an apple turnover, about 400 years old apparently, but I've had many a delicious raspberry turnover as well. Now linked in here would be other delights, again from my childhood. I would devour a cream horn, a true treat. Crispy pastry again, covered in sugar crystals, the filling of jam and cream with the chocolate-coated end. I would actually often eaten it the wrong way round, or the right way round if you're into the whole "that's how monkeys eat bananas" things. Start with the pointy end in itself, often a little treat of compressed pastry and sugar and much jam, finishing with the ring of the chocolate-coated pastry. What a delight! Now, I've never attempted to make them at home. God, when they did them on Bake Off, I think it looked pretty tricky, gravity and the whole baking thing and twisting and requiring the metal cones. Maybe one day I'll give it a go. Similarly, a millefeuille, if that's how you say it, layers of pastry cooked crisp and layered up with fruit or jam or cream or creme pat fillings. A delight, a true delight, especially when someone else has gone to the trouble of actually making it for you. Rarely will I go to the trouble of making my own puff pastry. I think one of my previous monologues on the podcast was about the joy and horror, in equal measure, of the days and days it takes to make croissants from scratch, which I will return to one day, I'm confident. But for now, the quasi-PTSD is too overpowering. Shop-bought puff pastry it is. I'll make my own short crust pastry sometimes. The trick being to only add as much water as is necessary to get it to form a ball, not just however much the recipe suggests. Little tip for you there, dear devoted listeners. Anyway, back to puff pastry. All the varieties, I love it. Turnovers, bacon and cheese twists, chocolate twirls, the millefeuille, the pies, the tarts. Although, question, I had a recipe recently for something which called for puff pastry as the base of the tart, but there was going to be no topping, so it was just a filled case. It seems a waste of the puff pastry if you don't get any puffing up, surely. But what do I know? Anyway, to finish off, here's a quick puff pastry idea for you. I like to roll out the shop-bought stuff, cut it into squares, maybe 4 or 5 inch squares. And this is a savoury recipe, just to forewarn you. I spread on a scoop of cream cheese diagonally, little salt and pepper, so it can be a little bit bland, that stuff. Then a slice of bacon diagonally with the cream cheese. A slice of fresh tomato, again, little dusting of salt and pepper, because tomatoes can take it. And then some grated cheddar on top. Fold over the 2 corners opposite each other to make a little jacket for the fillings. Coat this with beaten egg and into quite a hot oven for 25 minutes or so. Delicious, delicious. Now, I would call that a bacon turnover, but I really doubt its turnover qualities here. I've turned over 2 corners, I suppose. But anyway, try it yourself. A delicious bacon I turned the corners up myself. Enjoy. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening, wherever in the world you are. Subscribe to the podcast, however you get your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Acast, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon. The next episode will be out next Friday. If you fancy buying us a coffee, you can at buymeacoffee.com/thelongroadband. It's dead simple to just drop us a few quid to support what we do. It even accepts Apple Pay and Google Pay. Dead easy. All of our music and merch is on Bandcamp, where you can help support a positive ecosystem for the music industry. Download, streaming, vinyl, CDs, it's all there. thelongroadband.bandcamp.com. You can get hold of our books through the Artisan Creative website. Head to artisan-creative.com. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/artisancreative. Big thank you to our current Patreons for your ongoing support. If you'd like to support us, you'll get free digital stuff and merchandise in the post if you want it. Help us create something different, something that entertains, and something that inspires others. Join us on the journey. Patreon.com/artisancreative. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds, and explorers, for joining us on the long road. Remember, the world isn't beige. It's authentic, it's rich, and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with the long road. Bye for now.